sad story, the passing of an absolute Hollywood legend. It's a really bizarre story. Gene Hackman and his wife, along with their dog, all found dead in their home in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Something wasn't right. Neighbors noticed the quiet, the stillness, the way the house seemed untouched for days. Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, had always kept to themselves, but this silence felt different.
Shocking and heartbreaking, but investigators say it's unclear if Hackman knew that his wife of 30 years was dead for a week before he passed away.
When maintenance men arrived for a routine check, what they found inside their Santa Fe home left them stunned. Gene Hackman, the Hollywood legend, and his wife were dead. Their bodies had been there for days, but the real shock came when details started to emerge.
Testing for carbon monoxide was negative. There were no other significant natural disease findings.
Details that didn't quite add up. What really happened behind those closed doors? And did their deaths have natural causes, or is there more to the story? Well, you're about to find out. A quiet home hides a chilling secret. The Santa Fe Summit gated community was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Rich, quiet, private. A place where celebrities and the wealthy could live without the world peeking in. Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa had called it home for years. Their sprawling 8,700 square foot mansion sat on Old Sunset Trail, surrounded by the peaceful New Mexico landscape. It was the kind of house where everything was carefully controlled, gated, secured, and tucked away from prying eyes. But on February 26, 2025, that peace was shattered. It started as an ordinary afternoon. Two maintenance workers arrived for what should have been a routine visit. Maybe a small repair, maybe just another day on the job, but as they approached the house, something felt wrong. The front door was ajar, just slightly. A tiny detail. The kind of thing most people would brush off, but not them. They hesitated, called out. No answer. A cold breeze slipped through the open door, carrying with it a scent they would never forget. Something stale, something unnatural. They stepped inside, and then they saw it. A man, collapsed near the kitchen, still, lifeless. A few feet away, in the bathroom, another body. Their hands shook as they grabbed their phones. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a crime scene. The 911 call came in at about 1:45 p.m. A man, his voice tight with fear, reported what he had seen through the window.
No, dude, they're not moving. Just send somebody out here, really quick.
Two people, not moving. When officers arrived, they found what the workers had described, and worse. Gene Hackman's body lay near the kitchen, in the mudroom. He was dressed in a long-sleeved blue shirt, gray tracksuit bottoms, and brown slippers. A pair of sunglasses lay beside him as if they had fallen from his face. His walking cane wasn't far away. It looked like he had been on his feet one moment, then down the next. No signs of a struggle, no signs of pain, just stillness. And then there was Betsy. She was in the bathroom. The scene around her was strange and eerily unsettling. A small portable heater sat near her head. A prescription bottle lay open on the counter, pills scattered around. Her body was showing clear signs of decomposition. Her hands and feet had begun to mummify. That could only mean one thing. She had been dead for a while, but how long? And more importantly, who died first? The house itself offered no immediate answers. Nothing was out of place. No drawers were ransacked, no forced entry, no signs of a break-in. It was as if the couple had simply stopped living. But there was one detail that couldn't be ignored. The dogs. 3 dogs had been inside the house. One of them was dead, found in a bathroom closet just 10 to 15 feet away from Betsy. The other 2 were alive. One inside the bathroom with Betsy, the other outside. How had 2 of them survived, while one had perished? And if the dogs had been left alone for days, why weren't they more desperate? Something wasn't adding up. The evidence that raises more questions. The Santa Fe County Sheriff, Adan Mendoza, wasted no time launching a full investigation.
An autopsy was performed. Initial findings noted no external trauma to either individual. The manner and cause of death has not been determined.
To the untrained eye, this could have looked like a tragic case of natural causes. After all, Jean was 95 years old. Betsy was in her 60s. Death, at their age, wasn't unusual, but then came the details that made this case more than just a simple tragedy.
Hello there. Within the last hour, the authorities in Los Angeles have been giving more details about their investigation into the deaths of the actor Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa.
Gene Hackman had a pacemaker, a device meant to track and regulate his heart, a device that also recorded its last activity. The data was chilling. Gene's pacemaker hadn't shown any signs of life since February 17th, 9 days before the bodies were found. That meant, for over a week, the house had been silent. No movement, no calls, no one is checking in. But what about Betsy? Her time of death wasn't as clear. The mummification of her hands and feet suggested she had been gone for a long time, but had she died before Gene? Or after? She may have been lying in that bathroom for days, unable to call for help. Gene may have walked past the open door, seen his wife lifeless on the floor, and then collapsed himself. Or perhaps he had gone first, leaving Betsy alone in a house that slowly turned into a tomb. And then there were the pills. The prescription bottle near Betsy was open. Pills were scattered on the counter, but what kind of pills were they? They could have been for a medical condition or something else entirely. Toxicology reports could take up to 3 months, but the autopsy was already complete. No signs of external trauma, no carbon monoxide poisoning, no immediate cause of death. It was as if life had simply left them one after the other. But why? Gene Hackman's pacemaker recorded its last activity on February 17th, 2025.
On Thursday, February 27th, I performed an autopsy on Mr. Gene Hackman.
Investigators believed that was the day he passed away, but Betsy's timeline wasn't as clear. Her body showed signs of decomposition and mummification, especially in her hands and feet. The state of her remains suggested she had been dead for some time, but whether she passed away on the same day as Gene or sometime after remained uncertain. The home itself was large, 8,700 square feet of space designed for comfort and privacy. It was a house built for luxury, yet it became a silent tomb. Despite the unsettling scene, there were still no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no stolen valuables. Nothing appeared out of place, yet something still felt off. The front door was slightly open when maintenance workers arrived. It wasn't wide open, but it wasn't shut either. This small detail raised questions about whether someone had tried to leave or enter. Police found nothing that pointed to an intruder. There were no signs of a struggle. No drawers were pulled out, and no personal belongings were missing. But the circumstances were strange enough for Sheriff Mendoza to issue a search warrant. The open door, the scattered pills, the dead dog, and the separated bodies left too many gaps to ignore. Remember that inside the house, 3 dogs were found. 2 were alive, but 1 was dead. Its body was discovered inside a bathroom closet, just 10 to 15 feet from Betsy's body. At first, the dog was mistaken to be a German Shepherd. Later, it was discovered that the dog found dead in the Hackman home wasn't just any pet. It was Zinna, a 12-year-old Australian Kelpie mix with a reddish coat and a past full of agility training. She had once been skilled enough to compete at the Westminster Kennel Club dog show, but in the end, she was found lifeless in a bathroom closet, just feet away from Betsy. One of the surviving dogs had been inside the bathroom with Betsy. The other was outside. The presence of the animals added another layer of mystery. The dead dog had been locked away. Whether it had starved, suffered from dehydration, or died from something else was unclear. Meanwhile, the other 2 had survived. If Gene and Betsy had been dead for over a week, how had those dogs stayed alive? They may have found a way to access food and water, or perhaps Betsy had still been alive in the house, feeding them for some time before she, too, passed. The condition of the dead dog, separated from the others, suggested that it had either been trapped on purpose or had hidden away in fear. The investigation and the missing pieces. Authorities moved quickly to examine every detail. Deputies seized 2 cell phones, a planner, medical records, and various prescription medications. Among the medications were thyroid pills, Tylenol, and diltiazem, a drug used to treat high blood pressure and chest pain. Betsy's body was found next to an open prescription bottle, with scattered pills nearby. The type of medication wasn't immediately specified, but it raised suspicions. If she had died from an overdose, had it been intentional or accidental? An autopsy conducted the following day, on February 27th, revealed no external trauma on either body.
Mr. Hackman's initial pacemaker data revealed cardiac activity on February 17th.
Carbon monoxide poisoning was ruled out after tests came back negative. The Santa Fe Fire Department and New Mexico Gas Company inspected the home and found no gas leaks or hazardous conditions. While foul play wasn't immediately suspected, the suspicious classification remained. The bodies being found in separate locations, the presence of an open door, and the condition of the dead dog all pointed to a case that wasn't as simple as it seemed. Toxicology reports would take longer, possibly up to 3 months, before providing answers about any substances in their systems. As days passed, the silence surrounding the investigation became louder. Every detail of the case was unsettling. 2 people, living together for decades, had died under the same roof, but not in the same place, not in the same way, and possibly not at the same time. Gene's body was found near the kitchen, in the mudroom. His walking cane and sunglasses were close by, as if he had been in the middle of doing something when he collapsed. He had been fully dressed in his gray tracksuit pants, a blue long-sleeve shirt, and brown slippers. It looked as though he had simply fallen and never gotten up again. Betsy's body was found in a bathroom. The space heater near her head had tipped over. Pills were scattered on the counter. The open prescription bottle suggested that she might have taken medication shortly before her death. If Gene had passed away first, Betsy may have been too heartbroken to go on. She could have overdosed either accidentally or intentionally. But if Betsy had died first, Gene's body may have simply given out from the shock of losing her, perhaps even from a broken heart, as some friends had suggested. And if they had died together, their bodies being in separate places remained a mystery. Given Gene's age, 95 years old, his death might have been expected. Despite staying active with yoga and Pilates, he had lived a long life and had a history of heart issues. His pacemaker last recorded activity on February 17th, which could suggest he suffered a fatal heart failure or cardiac arrest on that day. Betsy's death, however, remained more of a mystery.
A number of questions have been answered to unravel some of the circumstances that led to Gene Hackman and his wife's death.
She was in her early 60s, significantly younger than Gene. No reports suggested she had been battling a terminal illness. Her body showed signs of prolonged death more than just a day or two. If she had died first, what had happened to Gene in the days that followed? The timeline of death was crucial in understanding the case, but until the autopsy and toxicology reports were completed, authorities could only work with the evidence at hand. With little public information released, theories began to circulate. Some believed Betsy had overdosed, intentionally or not. Others speculated Gene had suffered a medical emergency after losing her. The scattered pills raised questions. If Betsy had overdosed, had it been an accident or a choice? If she had been caring for Gene for years, had the stress become overwhelming? Or had she simply taken too much medication by mistake? Without concrete answers, the pieces of the puzzle weren't fitting together. A family's grief. Hackman's kids, Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie, released a simple but heartbreaking statement. "We are devastated by the loss." There was no mention of theories, no speculation, just grief. They had lost both Gene and Betsy at the same time, without warning. Whether the deaths were from natural causes or something more complicated, their pain was the same. Friends who had known the couple for years described them as private, deeply connected, and devoted to one another. If Gene had lived alone after Betsy's death, he wouldn't have lasted long. If Betsy had lost Gene first, she may not have been able to cope. The tragedy lay in the unknown. Betsy had been more than a wife to Gene. She had been his caregiver. Years earlier, Gene had undergone a triple bypass surgery. While he had been in good health afterward, Betsy had taken on the role of caretaker, ensuring he maintained a healthy lifestyle. Friends described their relationship as deeply loving and inseparable. Betsy had been one of the biggest reasons for Gene's well-being in his later years. Her sudden absence may have been devastating for him. If she had passed first, Gene, already 95 years old and physically dependent on her support, may not have been able to function on his own. The last known public sighting of Gene and Betsy had been almost a year earlier, on March 28, 2024. They had been seen dining at Papa Do's Seafood Kitchen in Santa Fe. By all accounts, they appeared healthy, happy, and engaged. In the weeks leading up to their deaths, maintenance workers had last communicated with them around mid-February. The conversations had mostly been with Betsy via phone and text. After that, there was silence. Authorities scheduled a press conference on March 7, 2025, to release any new findings. Investigators were working through the evidence, hoping to build a timeline and determine what really happened in the final days of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. Gene Hackman's nephew, Tim Hackman, remained cautious, waiting for the toxicology report to provide answers. He avoided jumping to conclusions, knowing how quickly rumors spread. At first, the family had accepted Gene's passing as a natural event. He was 95 after all, but as more details surfaced, doubts crept in. Something about the circumstances didn't sit right, and now, everything felt different. With authorities keeping details tight, the final answers would come down to the autopsy and toxicology results. Detailed autopsy reports would take several weeks, and toxicology results wouldn't be available for months. Until then, the case remained open, with more questions than answers. Despite the absence of clear foul play, the unusual details surrounding their deaths left an unsettling feeling. Gene Hackman, an iconic Hollywood legend, had spent his final years in quiet retirement, but the way his life ended had become a mystery that the world wasn't ready to forget. Investigators had ruled out carbon monoxide poisoning. There were no signs of external trauma. The toxicology report would be the last piece of the puzzle, but it could take up to 3 months to complete. As the days passed, the world continued to wonder. For now, the case remained open, the truth waiting to be revealed. A childhood marked by loss and change. Sarah Gilbert was born on January 29, 1975, and from the very start, life dealt her a tough hand. Her adoptive father, Paul Gilbert, died of a brain hemorrhage shortly after her birth, leaving Sarah's mother, Barbara Cowan, to raise her baby alone. Seeking stability, Barbara remarried but ended up divorcing again, so Sarah spent her earliest years watching her family fall apart in different ways. Even before she fully understood the meaning of loss, she saw how delicate family life could be. On top of all this, Sarah had half-siblings who were already in show business. Melissa and Jonathan Gilbert starred in Little House on the Prairie, and seeing them act fueled Sarah's own dream of performing. Yet it wasn't just ambition that drove her forward. It was also a need for a safe place in a world full of sudden changes. Acting seemed like a chance to shape her own story, even when everything at home felt so unsteady. In 1984, Sarah made a major decision to take the last name Gilbert after her mother's marriage to Paul came to an end. Though she lost him early in life, that name tied her to the memory of a father figure who had inspired her creative hopes. Her grandfather, Harry Crane, a co-creator of The Honeymooners, also deepened her family's ties to Hollywood. Surrounded by people in the entertainment industry, Sarah believed she was meant to perform, no matter the sadness and chaos in her personal world. As a child, Sarah also saw her loved ones struggle with money, especially when her father, Harold Abels, hit hard times. She took on grown-up responsibilities, supporting him for a while as she tried to keep her own career afloat. The stress of balancing a budding acting path with family needs weighed heavily on her, but she refused to give up. She was determined to find her place in front of the camera. Despite all the sorrow that marked her early years, Sarah learned powerful lessons about strength and self-reliance. She discovered she couldn't change the past, but she could shape her own future. Each setback pushed her to try harder. Acting became more than a hobby. It was her way of coping and surviving. She relied on the support of her siblings, and each audition became a chance to prove she could rise above her sorrows. Overcoming the pain of her early years did not happen overnight, but every small victory showed her that new beginnings were always possible. Through those losses and constant changes, the foundations of Sarah Gilbert's strength were built, showing that heartbreak doesn't have to break you. It can light the path to a brighter tomorrow. The pressure of fame at a young age. Sarah Gilbert soared into the public eye at just 13 years old when she was cast as Darlene Connor on the hit sitcom Roseanne. Suddenly, the quiet girl from Santa Monica found herself juggling schoolwork with long days on set, earning nods from critics and fans alike for her sharp wit and natural charm. However, stepping into the spotlight so young also brought heavy expectations. Producers recognized her talent and shaped storylines around her, forcing Sarah to grow up much faster than her peers. All eyes were on every move she made, and she had to learn quickly how to handle fame without losing her sense of self. While most teenagers worried about tests and homework, Sarah faced constant media buzz and family stresses behind the scenes. Her adoptive father, Paul Gilbert, died shortly after she was born, and her mother married and divorced again, adding emotional strain to her early life. Even with these private challenges, Sarah had to show up to work as a professional each day. The industry treated her like an adult in many ways, yet she was still a child trying to figure out who she wanted to be. Balancing fame with real-life heartache was a delicate act she couldn't escape. As the breakout star of Roseanne, Sarah's role was so pivotal that producers rearranged filming schedules when she enrolled at Yale University. Determined to nurture her independence and continue her education, young Sarah flew back and forth, shooting her scenes in New York while taking classes. Though it was an incredible opportunity, it also added pressure to an already busy life. She was grateful for the chance to pursue higher learning, yet she never had the luxury of stepping away from the public's gaze. Each success only fueled the demand for more appearances and more personal details. Off-camera, Sarah also struggled with questions about her sexuality and her relationship with her father, Harold Ableys, who faced financial troubles. She felt responsible for helping him, even as she fought to uphold the image of a confident young star. In truth, she was just trying to survive the scrutiny, feeling torn between work and family obligations. Constantly under the spotlight, Sarah found it difficult to preserve her privacy or process personal challenges on her own timeline. With every year spent in front of the camera, she risked losing the normal teenage experiences that most people take for granted. A painful relationship with her father. Sarah Gilbert knew heartbreak from an early age, but her struggles with her father, Harold Ableys, were some of the hardest moments she faced. Her adoptive father, Paul Gilbert, passed away soon after she was born, leaving big gaps in her life. Then her mother remarried Harold, and for a while, Sarah hoped this man could be the dad she had always longed for. Yet as she grew older and rose to fame on Roseanne, it became clear that Harold's personal problems would put her in a very difficult spot. Harold, once a respected lawyer, fell on hard times and looked to Sarah for financial help. Though she was barely out of her teens, Sarah found herself supporting him with the money she earned from her acting. She cared deeply about him and wanted to ease his burden, but it felt overwhelming to provide for someone who was supposed to protect her. With each contribution she made, she questioned why the role of caregiver had fallen on her so young. She was only 18 or 19, but earning more than her father, who had lost his way. Their relationship turned tense as Sarah felt uncertain about how far her support should go. Eventually, she chose to stop giving Harold money. This decision weighed heavily on her heart. She realized how much he must have struggled with asking for her help in the first place. Even though it felt right to set these boundaries, She could not ignore the sadness that came from watching her father spiral. Years passed with hurt feelings on both sides, but when Harold fell seriously ill, Sarah stepped up once again. She became his main caregiver in his later years, standing by him when he needed her most. Despite the painful history and many regrets, she did her best to mend what was broken between them. By the time Harold passed away, Sarah had given much of her strength to their complicated bond, channeling her guilt and love into caring for him right up until the end. That final act of kindness helped her find some peace in the midst of their long, messy story. Still, she carried the burden of a daughter who'd had to grow up too fast, providing for her own father while also supporting her own dreams. Sarah's relationship with Harold was marked by confusion and heartbreak, but it also showed her capacity for compassion, resilience, and the deep need we all have for acceptance, no matter how late it arrives. Coming to terms with her sexuality. Sarah Gilbert's path to accepting her sexuality was not an easy one, especially in the glare of Hollywood. While she rose to fame as the witty, sarcastic Darlene Connor on Roseanne, her personal life was swirling with doubt and worry behind closed doors. During her teenage years, she dated her co-star Johnny Galecki, hoping to feel normal and fit in with what she believed everyone expected. Yet deep down, Sarah sensed something different about herself. As her feelings grew stronger, she couldn't help fearing how they might affect her career. At the time, the entertainment industry was not entirely welcoming to gay actors, and Sarah worried that coming out could harm her future on screen. Rather than risk losing work or being labeled in a way she feared, she kept her truth hidden, pushing away the questions that surfaced whenever she felt attraction outside the norm. Johnny became a true friend in this struggle. Even though she had dated him, he supported her once she came to him in tears, admitting that she thought she might be gay. He offered to stand by her side publicly if that would help her feel safe. This kind gesture meant the world to Sarah. Knowing she had someone so understanding eased some of her fears, but it took time to build up the courage to share her truth with others. As she prepared to launch her talk show, The Talk, in 2010, Sarah felt the weight of keeping her secret grow heavier. She worried that being on a public platform every day would invite questions about her private life. Eventually, she decided she no longer wished to hide who she was. Telling viewers she was a lesbian lifted a burden she had carried for years. Yet her fear was still real. She wondered if audiences or producers would treat her differently. Surprisingly, opening up led to a sense of relief rather than the career backlash she had imagined. Critics applauded her honesty, and fans appreciated her bravery. Johnny Galecki's unwavering support remained a highlight of her journey. He even offered to join her on air the day she opened up, ready to hold her hand if she felt nervous. Heartbreak in love and relationships. Sarah Gilbert's journey with love has been marked by moments of hope, fear, and deep heartbreak. When she was a teenager, she dated her Roseanne co-star Johnny Galecki, seeking the comfort and excitement of a normal teenage romance. Yet she soon realized her feelings weren't what she expected, and finally admitted to Johnny that she thought she might be gay. Rather than push her away, Johnny became one of her fiercest supporters, even offering to join her in public if it would ease her worries. Still, Sarah wrestled with the shame and uncertainty of keeping such an important part of herself hidden. Years later, after embracing her sexuality, Sarah entered a long-term relationship with TV producer Allison Adler. They shared 2 children and built a life full of family moments. But as time passed, they drifted apart. Breaking up was painful, and Sarah found herself questioning the nature of commitment and whether true love could last. This emotional wound didn't stop her from believing love was worth trying for again, although it left her hesitant about placing her heart on the line. Her next big relationship came with musician Linda Perry, known for her work as the lead singer of 4 Non-Blondes. Their connection was electric from the start. The press soon picked up on their romance, capturing photos of them together as their bond deepened. In 2014, Sarah and Linda married, and a year later, they welcomed a son, Rhodes Emilio Gilbert Perry. For a while, it seemed like Sarah had found the stability she had always craved. However, the stress of balancing a demanding career and a growing family began to take its toll. By the end of 2019, Sarah and Linda made the decision to divorce, each of them admitting that things simply were not working anymore. This second major heartbreak left Sarah struggling to cope with her broken dreams of a lasting marriage. While they parted ways, both Sarah and Linda remained dedicated to co-parenting Rhodes, hoping to give him a sense of security even after their split. Sarah knew she needed to focus on her mental well-being, carving out time for therapy, yoga, and the kind of self-care she had neglected for years. A fight for balance and self-care. Sarah Gilbert's life behind the scenes was not always glamorous. Balancing a demanding acting career, personal relationships, and motherhood often left her feeling drained. Over the years, she realized the importance of looking after her own health, both physically and emotionally. Despite her success on shows like Roseanne, The Big Bang Theory, and The Conners, she struggled with carving out time to recharge and reconnect with what mattered most. Work took priority, and any extra time was spent caring for her children or traveling between sets. When Sarah co-created and co-hosted the daytime talk show The Talk, the hectic schedule became even tougher to handle. She felt a growing pull to slow down and be present for her family. Yet she found it hard to step away from projects she had poured her heart into. This inner battle between ambition and self-preservation pushed her to examine how she managed her life. Eventually, Sarah had to face the tough truth. She could not do it all without changing something. As she left The Talk, Sarah spoke openly about needing to focus on her children and her own well-being. It was a personal decision that took courage, especially after giving so much of herself to the show. She admitted that her commitments had pulled her in many directions, leaving limited space for exercise, rest, and reflection. What little time she had off was often filled with errands or additional work demands. Realizing she was neglecting her mental health, Sarah became determined to build a better routine. One small but powerful step involved making room for daily exercise or yoga. Dedicating even 15 minutes a day to stretching and breathing helped Sarah clear her head and reconnect with how she felt. This simple practice became a grounding force in her busy schedule, reminding her to set boundaries and honor her own limits. Therapy also played a part in her healing process, giving her a safe space to let go of the stress she had been quietly holding inside. By focusing on these personal steps, Sarah gradually found more harmony in her life. It was not a quick fix, but a steady journey of learning to say no when necessary and making self-care a priority. She continued to pursue exciting projects, but with a new understanding of balance. Now, Sarah openly shares the lessons she learned, reminding others that true success demands knowing when to pause, recharge, and tune into our own needs. What do you think truly happened behind the doors of the Hackman home? A tragic accident? A medical emergency? Or something no one had yet considered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen, and you will enjoy it.